Greetings, listeners. This is Jamie with a public service announcement. I'm afraid due to some logistical difficulties with recording this week, you will experience some distortion of sound, weird, phony sound effects and odd noises. I've done my best to remove them, but apologies in advance. And now over to Pod 11.
Hello.
Hello, Richard James.
Well, this is the bizarrest thing ever, isn't it?
Oh, I know.
Jamie.
Goodness me. How are you?
Gosh, I'm really well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. Thank you.
Oh, you're looking a little bit tired, Jamie.
Thanks very much.
Burning the candle at both ends, are we?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been in the last 48 hours. No, that's not fair. The last 38 hours, I've been at home for 6 hours and asleep for 5.5 of them.
Oh, crikey. That's mad.
It is a bit bonkers.
That is completely mad.
So I've got my laptop over there, my microphone between my legs, my iPad with a script on here.
Great.
So we can,
That's
and
brilliant.
people in the car park looking at me being like, what's he doing?
Yeah. It's a real outside broadcast, isn't it?
I have my own little OB unit here. It's
Actually, say you're on the M4. I probably could have driven up and joined you. You know that.
we could have sat in the car together and done it. No, we'll keep it like this. It'll be weird.
Right.
It's already getting a bit warm in the car as it is. Don't want two bodies.
So while you're sat in a car park and I'm sat comfortably at home, Jamie,
Yes, Richard.
shall we move on to Pod 11?
Let's do it. Pod 11.
Woohoo!
Hello, partners. You are listening to the Jerry Henderson podcast. I hope you enjoy it. Cheerio.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Let's get started. Let's go.
Spectrum is green.
The Jerry Anderson Podcast with Jamie Anderson and Richard James.
Not sure it quite merited a woohoo, but okay.
Of course it did. It's Pod 11.
Right. It's Pod 11, yeah. We're well into double digits now. Well, we're 2 into double digits now.
Yeah.
I'm Jamie Anderson, and you are?
Oh, well, I'm Richard James still, of course.
Brilliant. That's nice
Yes.
to know things are staying consistent.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's lovely to be here. Thanks for joining us.
Yes. This is a bizarre one, isn't it? I've never spoken to you in the car before.
I should add I'm not driving. Yeah, I'm in a car park, and the services are on the M4 because it was literally the only time we could manage to record this podcast.
Yes. It's been a bit tight this week, isn't it?
It has been a little bit. Anyway,
Actually, it feels like one of those TV shows where they surprise someone. So I'm talking to you in your car. It looks like you're about to drive up to a listener's front door and knock on their door and surprise them and interview them live on the podcast.
maybe for a future episode we should do that.
There's a thought.
But for
Knock on
now,
your doors. If you see Jamie, hide. Draw the
Yeah.
curtains, turn the lights out. We're not here.
yeah. Or if you see me hiding in a bush outside your house, don't call the police.
Yeah. Wouldn't be the
Something-
first time that's happened, would it, Jamie?
Let's move swiftly on, Richard. What have we got coming up?
Well, we've got loads of fantastic stuff coming up for Pod 11. Of course, we've got Jerry Anderson news, some really exciting stuff going on there. We've got lots of lovely listeners' emails that we shall get round to a little later. And, of course, we have our staple fare, the randomizer from Chris Dale. Where
indeed.
Chris is sat in front of a random episode. Who knows what it'll be? And he gives us his thoughts and comments as he goes. And of
Yep.
course, you can get in touch with us on podcast at jerryanderson.co.uk. And of course, you can review us, rate us, and share us, and subscribe to us.
You should do all those things.
Yes, on whichever platform you're listening to.
Please do those things.
Please do. We have a little tweet from Emma, aka Thunderbird Fury, who said, I downloaded Stitcher from the Google Play Store, and the Jerry Anderson podcast is in my favourite list and number 1 on it too.
So it should be.
Well,
I'm
I
glad
should
to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great, though. So Stitcher is another of these platforms that you could be listening to the podcast on. I've got a few comments. People have left comments on Stitcher over the last couple of weeks, so I thought I'd read some of those as we go.
Sprinkle them throughout
Yes,
the podcast.
liberally.
Brilliant.
Exactly. And Jamie, as if that wasn't enough, you have a
yes.
very exciting interview coming up, don't you, this week?
Well, subject to me getting there and it going all right, because I'm on my way to do it now. Yes. I've got an interview with Chris Packham.
Chris Packham, that's amazing.
I was going to say a really wild interview with Chris Packham, but that only means something to a small segment of audience, I guess.
Well,
the Really Wild Show. What was that, with Michaela Strachan and Terry
It was
Nutkins?
with Michaela Strachan, who he now presents the various spring watches and autumn watches with as well.
Anyway, we noticed Chris wearing Jerry Anderson t-shirts quite a lot on the shows, and that's why I got in touch. And he was very happy to hear from us, and his agent has very kindly arranged this little visit. So I'm off to his house in Southampton. Very exciting.
Brilliant to talk all things Anderson. And now here's a little thing for you. Here's a scoop for you, Jamie.
Oh,
Chris
I love a
Packham.
scoop.
Chris Packham is my wife's celebrity deal breaker. You know what I mean? It's true.
I'm not sure we can include that in the
Come
podcast.
on. Well, maybe don't include it in the interview, but I'm sure it's something listeners would like to know.
That is fascinating.
Do you know who my celebrity deal breaker would be? Romek from Space Precinct.
I was going to go for Took, but okay, Romac, unexpected. Anyway, goodness me, stay with us for all those things. We've got lots of goodies coming up.
Yes, well, Jamie gets lots of very strange looks in the car park.
Well, people are just staring at me. It's very weird. Anyway, so what's happening now, Richard?
What's happening? I think it's probably time for a bit of news.
I think you're right. Here we go.
Hi, Gordon Tracy speaking. It's time for the Jerry Anderson News.
Right, first up, the breaking news. It's a spot of I Told You So.
Oh, we love a bit of that. Is this where you get on your high horse?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm very high on my horse. The Captain Scarlet Deluxe box set is sold out.
Yeah.
We went on and on about it for weeks. Said it was going to sell out, and now it's gone. That's it. If you got it, lucky you. I hope you really enjoy it. It's a brilliant set. If you missed out, then you should listen to us and grab it while you still can. Goodness
Absolutely
me.
right. Yeah.
And on that note of limited edition things, there is a pre-order open for limited edition Captain Scarlet Spectrum issue pistols.
Right.
And they are also limited. They're more limited than the box set. They're not out yet, so you've got a little bit more of a lead time. But
there you go. So be warned.
I don't want any whingy tweets saying, "Oh, I can't believe you didn't tell us you were going to sell out." We did lots.
Whingy tweets.
Whingy tweets. You get the occasional whingy tweet. That's what Twitter's for.
I've never had a whingy tweet.
I often send whingy tweets. So there we go. Anyway, that's the Captain Scarlet thing. That's end of I Told You So for now.
Is this a segment that's going to be appearing every week?
Told you so. Told you so.
Dum 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 dum.
No, I'm sorry. I'll stop now. Anyway, some more exciting. No, not more exciting news. Some news of something that's coming up.
Equally exciting news.
The Joe 90 50th anniversary poster is available for pre-order now.
Wow.
It continues the lovely series of posters we've had done by the marvellous and very talented Eric Chu, famous concept artist and man behind much of the redesign of the newest Battlestar Galactica series.
Yes.
And very nice chap.
These will be the very famous posters that infamously fell off my spare room wall during the early days of our Fab Live broadcasts.
Way back in Fab Live 2, 3, whatever it was. Disaster.
We'll talk about that later.
Let's not talk about that. So that follows on the series that we've already had of his posters, which include Terrorhawks, Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet, Space 1999.
Space Police. The Shane Rimmer, lovely
Space
Shane
Police,
Rimmer
some of the Lost World stuff. You'll be able to look at it on the Jerry Anderson store right now and pre-order it. I can't remember what the price is, but it's very reasonable.
Yes, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's very reasonable.
There we go. Anyway, just some little Firestorm reminders for you.
It's all very exciting.
Again, in case you don't know, Jerry Anderson's Firestorm is a new puppet series that we're working on, filmed in Ultramarination, advanced puppets, miniatures, practical effects, and in the words of the great Steve Begg, well, that's what I'd say is practical effects, really, Richard.
But explosions.
There is no harm in saying explosions more than once, because explosions are awesome, and they're a hallmark of Jerry Anderson stuff, right?
In the words of Steve Begg, we're bringing Century 21 into the 21st century. Oh, he's got away with words, hasn't he?
He does have. Yes. He has
occasionally.
Bless him. Anyway, so
some of them quite rude.
He's well, we can all be a bit of a swearer sometimes. I just looked over and thought everything had stopped recording for a minute, but I think we're all right.
That would never do.
Couldn't bear that. I'm going to have to keep waggling my mouse now.
Right, in a car.
Anyway.
In a car park. Okay.
This is getting worse.
Good luck
isn't
with
it?
that.
Anyway, so on the Firestorm front, if you want to keep up with the latest news on Firestorm, and we are now sort of telling people all about how it's come to be, the process of making the pilot mini-sode, all that sort of stuff, sharing some behind-the-scenes images. If you want to keep up with that, then you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Facebook, it's facebook.com/FirestormHQ. Instagram, instagram.com/FirestormHQ. And Twitter, twitter.com, we are at SF9 Firestorm. Sierra Foxtrot 9 Firestorm.
Great.
Sierra Foxtrot 9 Firestorm.
Yep, we got that. That's very good.
Dear me, can't
Yeah,
speak. Plus, we'll
excellent.
be regularly updating the Firestorm mini site on the Jerry Anderson site, jerryanderson.co.uk/Firestorm. And you'll be able to see lots of stuff coming up. We're also going to be doing some Firestorm-related interviews in the podcast coming in the next few weeks too. So you'll learn more about the people involved, why we've done it, learn some behind-the-scenes secrets, etc., etc.
Nice. And on Friday, for hashtag Firestorm Friday, I shall be tweeting at Richard N. James an exclusive behind-the-scenes picture of the little voice recording we did.
Excellent.
The Mars Research Station crew.
Yes.
So keep an eye out for that.
Richard is a member of a crew
Yes.
whose lives are in peril.
Hang in the balance, absolutely, yeah.
They do, yeah. Anyway, that would be a nice picture, yeah. So, yes, hashtag Firestorm Friday.
That's a great idea, isn't it?
Well, I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did.
Yeah, but it's nice.
So that's great. If you want to go a bit more old school, then there is a great article on the Jerry Anderson website right now, the top 5 satellites and space stations article. Space Precinct features quite heavily there, Richard.
Hooray!
So
Oh,
you'll
really?
quite like that.
Space
Check that
stations
out.
and satellites. That's obviously going to be the police station house is going to be up there, then, isn't it?
And in fact, there's a thing about that. That particular. There's a thing about that particular space station where a side-by-side image is posted, and once you've seen it, you'll never be able to unsee the comparison.
Oh, no.
So it might ruin it forever for you, but
Okay.
it's probably worth a go because it's quite funny.
Look.
So there we go. And, of course, the 27th of October.
So, now, Jamie, can you please
wanna
tell
keep
us
that-
more about this? What is happening on
Well,
the 22nd of
I
October?
can't tell you more about that, but what I can also tell you is that we'll be telling you more about it on the 27th of September.
Great.
So dates for your diaries, the 27th of September, the 27th of October.
Okay. Right.
There we go.
And that's very
I think it's the
enigmatic.
27th of September. Anyway, you'll hear more, but yeah,
Okay.
definitely keep the 27th of October in your diary. London, something fun, nice, good.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
That's it for the news. And
Fantastic.
no kitty news this week
No.
either.
No kitty news at all. No, but that's a
No.
shame. Now, have we got any electric fencing news, Jamie?
No, we're not doing electric fencing.
I'm only saying that because he's got a coil of the stuff behind him in his car that I can see.
I have got a kilometre of electric fencing
Wow.
coil in the back of my car.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Anyway,
that's
we
not a
don't-
sentence you hear every day, is it?
We don't want to talk about that.
No, we want to talk about the giveaway. We have 3 days left to enter for this month. Is that right now? What's that all about?
It is, yes, if you want to win £200 of Jerry Anderson prizes, tailored to your needs, within reason, then you should go to
Yeah.
jerryanderson.co.uk/giveaway, enter your details, and you could win 200 quid worth of lovely prizes.
Yeah, maybe a metre or two of electric fencing if you've got any spare at the end of it all.
I probably will have some spare, so if you're in need of that, want it signed or something, then we can do that. Anyway, that's it for the
Fantastic.
giveaway.
That's very good.
What now?
Well, what now? Well, listen, I've got a few comments
Oh,
to
you've
read
got
out.
some Stitcher comments.
I have. Now, Stitcher
I'm going to
is
have a drink while you do that.
You have a drink. You help yourself to it. What you've got there?
I've got diet sparkling fiery ginger beer made with root ginger and no added sugar.
What a way to start the day. Now, B. Brooks left a lovely comment on Stitcher. Myself and a flatmate are huge fans of Jerry Anderson. I'll be recommending this podcast to him and all my friends and also random people I meet on the streets.
Great!
So keep an eye out for him.
There's no better endorsement than that, I don't think.
Exactly right. Keys left a comment on Stitcher as well. A podcast for any fan of the work of Jerry Anderson, giving an insightful look in all things new and old. Funny and with great content. I can't recommend it enough.
In that order as
Yeah.
well. Funny and with
Funny
great content. I mean,
Is
that's
Yeah, that's not quite the order we're going for, is it? And finally, Danny91 left us a comment on Stitcher saying, wasn't expecting this to come out. Just took him by surprise a
That
bit
was
slightly.
it. That's the end of
And
the comment.
addition to Fab Live too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Really enjoy listening to it. It seems like a proper radio show.
That's generous.
Yeah, great to get the latest Anderson news and hear interviews too. And of course, that theme tune. Absolutely. Thank you, Danny91. But my favourite comment was one that you tweeted actually a week or so back. Which was left on our Pod 9 broadcast. This was Joseph Gambrell, who said, "This actually wasn't terrible, so thank you very much."
Oh, yes, I forgot about that comment. That is brilliant, yes.
I rather like that, damning with faint praise.
Yeah, although have you noticed no faint praise since then, so we must have
Yeah.
become terrible since.
Yeah, that's true. So do remember, you can subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to us on. Please rate and review and share with your friends so they get to hear it too. You can email us, podcast@jerryanderson.co.uk. Jamie's on Twitter. I'm Jamie Anderson. I'm on Twitter, Richard N. James. You can hashtag us, Jerry Anderson Podcast. And now I'll
There's
take
so
a
much
breath.
stuff, isn't there? Yeah, you should do all that. And also, just on the reviews thing, I imagine that people sort of hear us say, rate and review and subscribe every week, and they kind of become slightly numb to it. But I'd just like to say the reviews make a huge difference, because that is really the number one reason that people will actually listen to it. They might see the podcast and go, oh, what are the reviews like? And the more there are, the better. And on iTunes in particular, we're approaching 100 reviews, which is amazing, and they're all brilliant. So thank you so much. But if you're, sort of going, yeah, review, whatever, please do just take a minute to write us a little review. We'd really, really appreciate it. And
also-
Richard might read it out, unless
exactly.
it's rude or
That's
damning.
true, yes. And it does give us hope slightly, doesn't it, to see that there are people out there listening.
We love a bit of hope.
Yeah, we
Keeps
do.
us going, doesn't it?
Yeah. So, is it time for a few listener emails, Jamie?
I think it is, yes. I've been quite strict with the selection this week to keep the numbers down. So shall we head straight in?
Let's do that. Okay, so first of all, Alex Pass wrote into us, jerryanderson@podcast.co.uk. Greatly enjoyed the latest podcast, especially those Lions Made adverts, bringing back memories of watching the old special edition Thunderbirds VHS tapes that had those fantastic little extras at the start. And then he says in brackets, do we need to explain VHS for the kids? Nah, they can look it up on Wikipedia or something. Extraordinary, as Parker would say. And that's from Big Al, sent from my big orbit with double flavours of raspberry and orange, brackets. Really? Apparently, it's the greatest. Sounds disgusting to me, close brackets. Lots of parentheses there.
Yeah, multi-parenthetical.
Now, he was rather on a roll this week.
Was
he? Yeah, he then, a toilet roll, quite literally, you might think, because he then followed that up with, he says, the secret toilet confessions of the Anderson podcast, from Richard's souvenir props, brackets, well, it's better than just getting them thrown in the tip, to Jerry's wrong turn. I laughed so hard, my headphones fell off. Here's to Pod 11 from Big Al, sent from outside the gents' bathroom at Marineville Control. P.S. Or should that be P? Maybe not. Love Benji Anderson's theme Megamix. Is there an MP3 version available? Again, all that from Alex Pass.
Benji Anderson.
Yeah. Who can he
Benji's
mean?
Anderson.
Sorry.
Benji's Anderson theme. No, we'll keep that in, Richard, shall we?
Yeah, let's keep it in. Benji
People will
Clifford,
get
of
it.
course, we all know from Big Finish, devised that fantastic theme tune that we all know and love at the top of the podcast. Any hope that there might be an MP3 version?
We could probably look into it.
Yeah, I don't know what that would entail, really.
Yeah, well, we'll try and make it available anyway.
Yeah.
I didn't realise that Pod 10 had become so toilet-themed, but there we go. Sorry about that. It wasn't on purpose.
No, it really wasn't.
Well, thanks for those, Al.
Thanks,
Thank
Alex.
you for writing in. I'm glad you're enjoying it.
Yeah, please keep those parentheses in. I love all the brackets and quotation marks as well.
Yeah, it makes it more expressive somehow. And
It really does.
And beautifully delivered by you, Richard.
Well,
anyway,
thank you.
I've got one
Oh, yeah.
from Jonathan Westall.
Oh, yeah.
He says, hello, Jamie and Richard. Loving
hi.
the podcast. Been listening to it religiously since it began.
Bless.
I've been a fan of Jerry Anderson since I was a child in the 90s when they showed the reruns of Thunderbirds on BBC Two. I think. Correct me if I'm wrong about that. I think you're right.
Yes.
One memory I have on the subject of Thunderbirds when I was a kid, I watched a VHS that included the episode Day of Disaster on it many, many times. Then one day on a family trip to Wales going over the old Severn Bridge, my dad said, here we are crossing Allington Bridge. And I totally freaked out thinking the bridge was going to collapse like it did in the episode.
Whoa.
That's quite cruel
Yeah.
as a parent.
It's
to do
very
that,
cruel,
it?
isn't it?
God,
Sort of thing
you're
I do, but
a
cruel.
mean father. Well, I would probably do it too as well, but yeah, still. Now in my late 20s, and scarred for life, I imagine. imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm putting that in. He didn't say that.
Yeah.
My love for Jerry Anderson shows continues with purchase of your DVDs and merchandise, including the limited edition Captain Scarlet Blu-ray box set.
Woohoo!
Hurrah! And Big Finish releases, which are all absolutely brilliant. I'm glad you think so, John. Thank you. My question is about whether or not you're planning to do anything for International Thunderbirds Day on September the 30th this year. Keep up the great work, from Jonathan. Well,
what's going on there then?
Well, I'm glad that Jonathan managed to get a limited edition Captain Scarlet Blu-ray deluxe box set.
Yeah, because
lots
we
of
told
people
you.
won't do now. Yeah, exactly. Told you so. I'm glad you got that, Jonathan. It's such a lovely set. And that he's enjoying the Big Finish stuff. That's great too. Terrorhawks,
Yeah.
Captain Scarlet, and possibly more to come. Ooh, was that a tease? I don't know.
It might have been, Jamie.
Anyway, for Thunderbirds Day, we'll be doing something. I just don't know what it is yet. I mean, the very fact that I'm recording this in a car park on the M4
gives you an indication into Jamie's life.
of the limited amount of time that we have. But we should definitely do something. I think we might do some sort of limited edition release T-shirt or something similar. Mm-hmm. We'll do what we can anyway.
Yeah,
There'll be something. But International Thunderbirds Day was set up by ITV last year. They'll surely be doing something this year for it. Who knows what other good news there might be by then. So we'll sit tight. But the place to find out about it will obviously be on the podcast, on the website and Facebook page and blah blah blah.
Indeed so, yes, that's right. In fact, we should put a little plug in here for Fab Live, which is our almost monthly Facebook Live broadcast that Jamie and I do.
I love that you always have to insert
almost monthly. We've had a little bit of a summer break, but I think we'll be picking it all up again on September the 3rd. Monday, September the 3rd. That's the aim. So that'll be our
we'll
next
also be
Fab
trying
Live
to
broadcast.
record the next pod episode.
I know. That'll be a bumper day.
It's all going to be a bit tight, isn't it? Anyway, yes, join us on Fab Live, Jerry Anderson Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Jerry Anderson Official.
Right.
Now, Stuart, sorry, Richard.
Yes.
We've had another email from Anthony Down Under. Would you like to read
Let's
it?
have a look at that. Oh, yes, I remember. Yes, I remember Anthony, who says, Dear Rich and Jamie, so sorry I called you Stuart, Richard. Wait, did you? I didn't notice. No,
I don't think we made a thing of it, did we?
I don't think we made a thing of it
We
at all.
just glossed over it last week.
It was, he says, a complete accident. I don't know where I got the name from. Though with your encyclopedic knowledge of all interesting things, I was probably subconsciously channeling a childhood friend of mine who was a font of information.
That is a lame excuse, Anthony.
Well, I'm going to buy it, though.
It's a nice try.
Yeah, I'll go
all right,
for
Richard,
that.
whatever makes you feel better.
Thank you. Speaking of embarrassing mistakes, he goes on to say, when I was a kid, I thought Thunderbirds was an American show. Now, that's interesting.
Many people did.
Yeah. That was because it was so slick, in colour, like Batman, Star Trek, I Dream of Jeannie and Bewitched. Most 60s BBC shows were in black and white. And of course, there were lots of Defence Force guys in uniform. And of course, the accents. Again, a mistake which was not intended to offend. It's all right. It's fine. We don't take any offence. It's
Forgive
fine.
and forget, Anthony.
Exactly. I was a Thunderbird 2 boy myself, which also meant, of course, that I liked Thunderbird 4. Thunderbird 2 also had the best shade of green, a sort of emerald, which could easily not have worked if a different colour was used. I wonder if they ever released an official palette of colours. As Doctor Who is the show I know most about, I'm enjoying coming back to the Anderson universe now as an adult and being a more casual fan. It's refreshing to discover the other Anderson shows I've missed and Anderson fandom conventional wisdom. For example, I thought Space 1999 was a serious and scary drama as a kid and swapped trading cards of the show, probably from Australian chocolate or cereal packets, in the school playground. I also like the recent Thunderbirds live-action movie, which apparently has a poor reputation. Though don't ask me why. It's no Dark Shadows remake. Cheers!
Well, Anthony, very good. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Do you know what? On that Thunderbird 2 colours thing,
Yeah.
it's interesting that he says that it had the best shade of green, a sort of emerald, and a mention of an official palette. I'm pretty sure within Thunderbirds itself, Thunderbird 2 changed its colour almost weekly, almost
Did it?
episodically, because there was no reference
Official
in the
palette.
studio where they said, right, well, it's Pantone 369C.
I see.
I mean,
yeah.
that's probably pink or something, I don't know.
Yeah.
But they
Which
didn't have
would
a
also look
reference.
great.
Yeah, well, it would look different.
Yes.
But yeah, so it changed all the time, so there is no official one. People tend to like, there's a lighter green, which I think the closest commercial paint now is called Applejack.
Right, okay.
I think. I might have made that up.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's isn't it funny that somebody's like, oh yeah, Thunderbird 2 green. Well, there are about 10 greens
Yes.
in Thunderbird 2 because the studio is inconsistent.
Yeah, that's right. Because again, they didn't think we'd be talking about this stuff 50 years later. That's the extraordinary thing, isn't it?
If we'd popped back in the TARDIS and said, oh by the way,
Yeah.
we're
just
going to be discussing this on a podcast. What's a podcast? Oh, right, okay. Well, I mean, it would take a long time to explain the whole thing.
That's right.
But they wouldn't have believed it, would they?
No, I mean, these things were made really to be seen once and to be talked about in the playground the next day and then never referred to again. Yeah. It's extraordinary in this day and age.
Here we are,
Yeah.
53 years later,
I know.
Still going on about blooming Thunderbirds.
Sitting in a car park.
Let's not cover that bit.
No, okay.
Anyway, I'm glad Anthony's enjoying the shows more casually as an adult fan. That's a great way to rediscover them, to be like, I never watched that one when I was... I mean, Terrorhawks in particular, I think is good for that. Anyway, let's
Space
not go on
Precinct,
about
of course.
And Space Precinct, which is coming out on DVD in November. Anyway, swiftly moving on to our final message from today. I'm very pleased to say we've got an audio message in from Mark Simpson-Wedge.
Ah, this is lovely.
And here's what Mark has to say.
Hello listeners, my name is Mark. Some of you may recognise me as the YouTuber Dalek Sram, which is a combination of a Dalek from Doctor Who and Sram from Terrorhawks. Now you know. I've been a dedicated Jerry Anderson fan all my life, and I'm really enjoying these podcasts. I've been listening since the first one. Jamie, congratulations on Firestorm. I was proud and honoured to be one of the Kickstarter backers. The mini episode is awesome, and I love the theme tune. I could listen to that all day. I know what you've been through to get this project completed. I too am working on a big project involving Thunderbirds. There have been some setbacks and difficulties, but I'm hoping to get this completed eventually. So well done. Richard, I know you're doing a lot of work in the theatre right now, so if you ever put on a play at the Norwich Theatre, I'm sure my brother would be honoured because he works there and he'd love to meet you. He's a big Space Precinct fan. Because I live in Leicester, I shall be going to the Space Centre for the Fab Worlds of Anderson event in September. I'm looking forward to it. I'm hoping to interview some people there for a new video I want to do for this year's Thunderbirds Day. Keep up the excellent work, guys, and long live the Jerry Anderson legacy. Cheerio.
What a lovely message, Mark.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark, for getting in touch. That's
nice.
lovely. Yeah, very nice.
So, Richard, are you going to be in Norwich?
Well, funny enough, I am going to be in Norwich. So, if you didn't know, listeners, I'm currently on a theatre tour of David Walliams' Awful Auntie, coming to a theatre near you and London's Bloomsbury Theatre over Christmas. And yes, we are, Mark, going to be in Norwich, I think sometime in November. So maybe I'll see your brother then. Be nice, wouldn't it?
Exciting.
Yeah.
There you go. See, the Jerry Anderson podcast making listeners' siblings' dreams come true.
That's a very tenuous tagline, isn't it? I'm not sure we're going to use that one very often.
I'm going to put it as the subtitle on this podcast.
But that's great. But Mark does lots of lovely work. You can find him on YouTube, Dalek SRAM. You can follow him on Twitter, and he does lots of beautiful films about all sorts of stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for that, Mark. If you wanted to do what Mark did and share an audio clip with us, please do. Send us an email, whatever. I'd quite like it if we had some artwork to describe in an audio fashion.
Right.
I know you love it when I have these zany ideas.
Yes.
Anyway, send any old rubbish to. I won't say
Jamie.
that. No, I don't mean that. I meant
No, we know what you mean.
send whatever you like.
That's what you mean.
To podcast@jerryanderson.co.uk, and we'd love to answer your questions, read out your comments, etc., etc. So, send stuff in.
We really would, yeah, that'd be great. Yes, indeed. Now, we have a very exciting interview. Now, I'm assuming that you're going to make it, Jamie.
Right. Well, I'm filled with confidence now. I mean, I'm a good hour and a half away from Chris's at this stage. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what time are you due to see him?
In about an hour and a half.
Right. Okay. About time we heard from Chris Packham then.
Yes. Here we go, Chris.
My name is Chris Packham, and I'm a naturalist and broadcaster, so I make wildlife TV, amongst other things. I'm also obviously a fervent campaigner for various conservation causes, and that probably is where my, heart beats most strongly these days.
When you're not in the worlds of Jerry Anderson, of course.
Of course, yes, but I'm frequently in the world of Jerry Anderson, to be quite honest with you, because it had such a profound impact on my life, on my early life. I mean, I think the thing is, with people like myself, we're quite obsessive, And so it was one of the things that I obsessed about. So I would watch the programmes repeatedly, and they were repeatedly on TV, thankfully. And I got to know all of them. So I would remember the storylines and all of the characters. And my parents facilitated as much as they could afford to, all of the merchandise that came with it. So I surrounded myself with the toys or the models from that. And it was very much allied with the fact that I was growing up in the 1960s, and of course the space race was in full fury, and I was a massive fan, as my mother was, of that. So I had all the posters for the Apollo program on the wall alongside Thunderbirds, and to me they were part and parcel of the same thing.
I think a lot of people saw them that way. I should add that you're sat here in a shadow t-shirt, a UFO t-shirt.
Yes.
And it's your t-shirt. It's the reason that I got in touch with you, because I kept seeing pictures of you in appearances on telly in a Captain Scarlet t-shirt and this, I think, perhaps this very shadow t-shirt.
Yeah, this is relatively new. Most of the Thunderbird t-shirts that I have are folded up outside in storage because they've become a little bit too ragged for TV now. But no, I mean, I think I've always been, keen to sort of perpetuate the cult as well of the whole Gerry Anderson genre. It was just out there. There was nothing else on earth like it. It was very British, and I think that there are a number of things that I look back. I'm not nationalistic in any way, shape, or form, but I do like to celebrate the things that we're good at here: the BBC, the National Health Service, the RSPCA, and Gerry Anderson. They're all up there. No one else was doing it. We did it. Gerry did it. Sylvia did it. It was not done in Hollywood.
Yeah.
It was done in Slough, and that's just brilliant. I love that. It's British inventiveness in a shed almost.
It pretty much was a shed.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. Yeah, it's amazing that Americans think it was American, and lots of British people think it was American.
Do they?
Yeah.
And that's terrible.
I know, it's a great shame. Well, we're here to set them right. And also because Dad was sort of trying to escape from the less shiny aspect of Britishness, and he wanted to kind of make it feel American. There's that he famously said about how you could never say that we're launching the next mission to the moon from Scunthorpe. It doesn't have the glamour of Cape Canaveral.
No, but at the same time, obviously there were, because of his business associates. I mean, I've read quite a lot about, the whole enterprise, the enterprises, it went from one thing to another didn't it? But basically, they were shrewd, or the backers were shrewd. They knew they had to sell it in America because it was enormously expensive, wasn't it? I mean, you only have to look at the photographs of the sets to realise that every shot was taking an enormous amount of manpower to build the models, build the set, film it, treat it, everything else. I mean, this was not cheap television.
No. It will be very difficult to get it made today because of that.
Yeah,
it's just
next to impossible, and certainly not for children's. I mean, I started on the Really Wild show, and we now look back at that, those of us who remember the budgets from the Really Wild show, and know full well that we could make prime-time BBC One series for that money now.
Really?
The money just isn't there.
Yeah.
So things have very much changed. But, I think I've always got the impression that satisfying the American market was part and parcel of the premise. And certainly Lou Grade, who was famed for not only his cigars, but his shrewd business sense, who was a constant companion and fan, obviously, I take it, it must have had his eye on that American market.
Oh, yeah, always.
Yeah.
And he always found it easy to sell a new series, which is why there was such a fast turnover, why things like Thunderbirds didn't have a longer lifespan.
Yeah.
So it was great in one way because he was such a sort of an impresario and such a great patron of Dad's, but in other ways, meant that we're left with fewer episodes than we'd hoped anyway. So, Chris, take me back to little Chris in the early 1960s.
Yeah.
You said you've got a very good memory.
I have.
Do you have a sufficiently good memory to remember your first Gerry Anderson viewing experience?
Yes. It wasn't a viewing, though. I remember being on a slightly overcast, damp evening in Deep Dean, which at the time we called the Tyser Woods, because we would go there to picnic and drink Tyser. And my father, using a catapult mechanism to fire Fireball XL5 into the sky, and having improperly packed the parachute, it plummeted to the ground and smashed. So this was a toy that he bought,
yeah.
and he'd spent ages. And I remember him putting the decals on. You had to put the decals on yourself, and I wasn't allowed to do that. I was too young, and I'd have messed it up. So my father did it with absolute precision, and then we took the rocket. I hadn't seen the TV series. I was unaware of Fireball XL5 on TV. I think we probably had a TV at that time. It would have been black and white. But I do remember it coming down and breaking. And then I remember having that model for a long time afterwards, and the stripy blue, red and white parachute that folded into it and was constantly tangled. And it, it had interchangeable sort of heads because they detached. And one was yellow, I think, and the other was grey with red on. And then the stripes on the side, the red and yellow stripes, Fireball, and so on and so forth. But I didn't know about the TV series. I just knew about the rocket at that point. So for the first TV that came to me was Stingray.
Okay.
That was what I first remember seeing on TV. And I mean, it was just awesome. Stingray itself is just a beautiful shape. It's just beautiful. And I had a plastic toy Stingray which you wound the propeller up, and it had an elastic band underneath it, and it was meant to float on the bath water. Yeah, but it didn't. It always capsized, spun over, and sank, or floated upside down. And and my dad would sort of plasticine coins into it to try to get it, to stay upright in the bath, but it never did. And I had that model. For many, many years. I don't have it now. I don't know what happened to it. I presume that my mother filtered it at some point and it was lost. But so Stingray, and I loved the shape of it. I just thought it was a beautiful shape. And then of course you've got the fish, and you've got the cast of characters and Troy Tempest and all that stuff. And Stingray instantaneously became a staple. So I was massively into Stingray. The most treasured possession I have is a painting that my father did, a watercolour painting of Stingray. Really? Yeah, my dad was really keen to tutor me in art. He was a draftsman and had been a draftsman who went on to marine engineering. And he had this, well, I have it now. It's a small cardboard box which he stored his art materials in. Inks, pens, paintbrushes, so on and so forth. And it was one of those things that as a child I wasn't allowed to open without his permission, because there were precious things in there. And he would get his precious things out, and we would sit at the table, and he would say, "What do you want me to paint?" And I have a picture of Puff the Magic Dragon, and I have a fantastic painting of Stingray that my dad did for me, and it was on my bedroom wall for years.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Is that hidden away somewhere? Is it on display?
No, it's not on display. It's in an archive. I mean, I am a hoarder, but I am someone who I have an ordered archive, so it's outside. In a box in storage. But all of those things are, part and parcel of what made me what I was. So yeah, Stingray was the thing, and I loved it. And my parents were. The strange thing was, when I think back, I have a sister, we were not really encouraged. We were not disallowed, but we weren't encouraged to watch TV. We were encouraged to read, and I had the freedom to go out and explore. And my sister would be taken to ballet and ballroom and all of those sorts of things. So TV was sort of something that, we could, but they would never sit us down and turn it on. Yeah. But I don't know what it was, but they must have loved, the Anderson stuff too, but I remember watching it all, and they never said I couldn't watch Thunderbirds or Stingray or Captain Scarlet or any of that sort of stuff.
Did they watch it with you ever? Do you remember?
I remember my mum watching it, and certainly, when I was younger, obviously Stingray, I remember watching with my parents, both of my parents. But at the time it got to Thunderbirds, then my dad was obviously always at work, and I would watch it occasionally with my mum. But I guess my mum probably, because they did repeat them ad infinitum, by the time she'd seen that episode 2 or 3 times, she'd had enough. So I do remember her being, doing her needlework in the back room whilst I was watching Scott and Virgil doing their stuff in the front room.
That's a lovely memory. But at the time Stingray came out, you must have been sort of watching other bits and pieces on TV.
Well, I was very young. I was born in 1961.
Yeah.
So it was
64, I guess it was.
Yeah,
screened.
Yeah, but then they repeated it. That's the thing. So my earliest memories go back to be between 4 and 5, and I have very precise memories, but there aren't many of them. So and they're authenticated, but they're not continuous.
Yeah.
So it was only really after 5 that I've sort of have a sort of a continuity of memory, as it were.
Yeah.
And so, to be very honest with you, I have, I can remember sitting on the sofa, I can see and feel myself in that place at this point in time, and Stingray's on the TV, but it was Thunderbirds really that I have a more complete memory of, because that came a bit later and I was a bit older.
Compared to other TV at the time, did it feel very different watching things like, well, especially when you came to Thunderbirds?
Yeah.
Other kids' TV.
Was essentially boring.
I didn't twist your arm to say that.
No, but it was essentially boring. I kind of liked the make and do of Blue Peter because I was, again, we were encouraged to be crafty and to make things. Airfix was a big thing. If I told you what I'd done to my angels, my Airfix angels, with an air rifle, you'd probably cease the interview. Making things was a part of it, so I was kind of into that. But no, it was I've always loved science fiction because I've always loved science, and science fiction for me is all. I mean, look at Star Trek. We live Star Trek now. Most of it. We've got our transponders and all of these sorts of things, and we've watched so many of the things that were science fiction in the 60s and 70s come true. Many of them haven't, of course, but many have, and that's that's fantastic. So I always liked the fact that this was a projection of what we have now into the future then. Yeah. I never imagined that I'd live into that future. I mean, when you're a kid, you can't think of, the dates are all a bit messed up, aren't they, for Thunderbirds and things. They're 1 minute, they're 2017, they're 2036, there's various calendars and things. I remember it being in there and sort of, hold on.
We can't get into that discussion.
No, don't get into that, no.
That'll never be solved.
No, it'll be solved. But I never imagined living to that point.
Yeah.
So and again, I think that was there was a sort of a charm to that as well. It was the fact that it was like a bit like, I know I'll never know what T-Rex really looked like. I like the fact that I'm never going to know what T-Rex really looked like. I like that through my life it's changed and we probably got closer to the way that it really looked. Yeah. But I'm going to die without resolving that, and I like that. That's not something I don't need to resolve it. I like the idea of a progression, an ongoing progression with a tendency to. So, yeah, that's what, and I think the whole Anderson thing was that. I mean, look, Straker's cars, I've owned them. We sort of, we moved in that direction. It's brilliant.
Yeah. So Thunderbirds is your strongest early Anderson memory.
Yeah.
Did you get any sense of continuation from Stingray to Thunderbirds? Did you know it was the same people,
yes.
the same style? You felt that?
Yeah, yes.
But did it then feel like a leap forward? How did it compare to Stingray?
Yeah. Technically, it was obviously far more accomplished. It was more visually diverse. There were more things happening. It seemed to have more perspective. There was no doubt of that. Clearly, there were more. There was a greater scope for sets. It was underwater. It was on top. It was in the air. So it was far more encompassing, and also I think that it struck me at the time that the models, the vessels, the ships and so forth were more realistic. If you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Although looking back now, they probably couldn't have flown, but the wings were back to front, which was a furious point of debate. I've got to tell you. Yeah, so I had the plastic Thunderbird 2.
Right.
And I got it out on Christmas morning, and I put the wings in facing in the correct direction, i.e. forward.
Yeah.
And my dad, who was very, very keen on, aviation, particularly Second World War aircraft, but others, immediately came in and turned the wings around and said that wouldn't fly. And it was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? They face this way, Dad. Anyway, that was constantly, because they sort of slotted in. They weren't glued in. You know.
So it was a constant tussle, was it?
Yeah, constant tussle. But the rockets in Thunderbirds, 1 and 3 looked like real rockets.
Yeah.
there was they'd obviously, who was the designer? I can't remember his name.
Derek
Meddings, yes. He although he was sort of controversial, he did bizarre things like he put the steering wheel in the middle of Fab 1 and the four wheels at the front and there was all sorts of sort of cheeky things. I felt they were him just being naughty, for the sake of being naughty. Oh, I'm just going to reverse the wheels.
Yeah.
But bearing in mind, we did have a Formula One car that came later of a similar configuration, the Tyrrell. So, but there was that sort of inventiveness, push it, naughtiness, but they did look more real.
Yeah, but they were based in an appreciation of mechanics and aerodynamics and aeronautics because Dad and Derek were both fascinated by flight.
Yeah.
So they were grounded in reality, but with that slightly ridiculous element.
Yeah, the cheekiness, which was great, and that added a really attractive design feature to them.
Yeah.
They didn't need to be, in nature, we're always interested in the form of something so that we can elucidate its function. And that's one of the great games we play. We can look at a skull, we can look at a nest, we can look at anything, a wing, and we can figure out how it works by looking at its form. But what I liked about, obviously, the rockets, the vessels, the craft, was that sometimes there was an artistic element there. I like that. I like the fact that they were cheeky and naughty with the artistic element. I mean, they looked good. I mean, that's the key thing. They weren't just practical. I mean, the Saturn V, I had the Airfix Saturn V model, was boring. It was just like a white tube with USA on it. And it stood on my side and we painted it white and I just wanted to glam it up and put more fins on it to make it look more like Thunderbird 1.
Some detailing on it, and panels and dirty it down.
Do you know what I mean? Well, make it interesting. Yeah. Whereas Thunderbird 1 looked more interesting than the Saturn V. So it was that blend of practicality and art, which I think is important.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, a hallmark of almost every Anderson series.
Yeah.
With that cheekiness and that complex element, you mentioned before this, the kind of the repeatability of the launch sequences and stuff, and how long they take compared to kids' TV now.
Yeah,
was that as a kid, for me, I always found that the kind of the gearing up, the loading up, the descent into Thunderbird 2, that kind of thing. I don't know. It was such a weird approach and an overly complex way to get to their craft. That was one of the bits that
but that was all about the puppet, surely, wasn't it? That was because they couldn't walk in through doors, so you put them in seats and pushed them in sideways.
But what a creative way to do it.
Yeah, brilliant. It was brilliant, and it was also high tech. And it was like, why would we walk in the future? I mean, what is Neil Armstrong? What an idiot. He's walking up a ladder to get into a space rocket that's going to take him to a moon. What a fool. Why isn't he using one of those things on Thunderbirds where he sort of slides in sideways on a seat, So there was, I mean, I of course, with the benefit of hindsight, it was all about the marionation, but it looked great. And the thing is that, yes, they were laborious, all of those sequences, but as soon as they were initiated, you knew what you had coming. And that predictability and the repetition, I think, is really important for kids. I loved the repetition. I loved the fact that the minute the process, the minute the blue touch paper was lit, we were going to go through that whole procedure of loading it, doors coming up, ramp going up, engines igniting, taking off, palm trees, swimming pool, the whole lot. And you knew exactly what was going to happen. And you sat there and just lapped it up. It was part of it. And now you watch it and you think, oh, get this over with. Someone please just blast off. But, at the time, it was... No, it was absolutely brilliant. It was part and parcel of it. It was so reassuring. Yeah. And it was, and we learned it all. And I remember you remember to see it all because the same thing happened. Yeah. Palm trees and all that. And it was fantastic.
Yeah. And I guess part of the reason it didn't become boring as a kid is because it was so beautifully made. Everything was so detailed. It was almost something new to see every time, even though it was the same sequence over and over again.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And I was watching that in black and white. We didn't have a colour television until much later, so I didn't get to see it, I suppose, in colour till a long time later. But the colours were beautiful too. I've got to say that they were subtle. I mean, I'm really repulsed by sort of Pixar and all of those sorts of things. And the principal reason for that, and obviously Meg's, as my stepdaughter, has been to see them all, and I do whatever I could to get out of going to see them, for all of their artistry and their cleverness and their wit and everything else, they're too colourful. They're just like a visual. There's no tonality in it. They're all bright of the even tone. They're essentially visually boring. But what I like about Thunderbirds was the slightly sort of faded, subtle coloration of it all. There's a sort of it's not pastel, but it's got its own colour flavour, and I've always liked that flavour in art as well as just TV.
Yeah, well, there is a very specific Century 21 palette.
Yeah,
And they're somewhere between kind of the more vibrant and pastel shades. Even something like the pink of Fab 1.
Yeah,
which is not
Scarlet,
a grim colour.
Yeah,
yeah,
and it's not bright scarlet.
Yeah,
and they just looked more everyday. They looked more believable, really, than things being brilliantly coloured. I suppose you got to the late 70s, and then Lamborghini and Porsche brought out those. The Miuras came out in lime and orange and red, and the Porsches came out in that vibrant green and yellow. So the late 70s, there were bright colours in sort of mechanical devices, cars, things that we saw around. But certainly when Thunderbirds was out, I don't remember ever seeing brilliant red or orange cars kicking around the streets. So it was more believable. They were the same colour as a sort of the more flamboyant sort of Vauxhall Viva or Ford Escort.
So things that you can see every day, but projected into the future.
Yeah, they were a lot more interesting, obviously, because our Vauxhall Viva couldn't do what Thunderbird 1, 2 or 3 could do. If my dad had tried trying to do what Thunderbird 4 did, we'd all be in trouble.
On the Thunderbirds front, are there any particular stories or rescues or...
Well, I mean, obviously I love the animals. There was one about alligators. And
I thought you might mention the alligators.
Yeah, the alligator one. I now worry about what was going on with those alligators from a husbandry point of view. But this was the 1960s, so I'll try not to worry too much about it. But of course, obviously, I love that because I loved alligators, fierce animals, big teeth, relics of dinosaurs, all of those sorts of things. So, that was a clear favourite. I remember that.
It is a particularly appealing one.
I have to say one other thing as well, which is a little bit bizarre. I loved all the crashes. I loved all of that crashing stuff, when things sort of caught fire and broke down, whether they were communication towers or buildings or aircraft that wouldn't land because they were going to explode and they had to put little sort of skateboards underneath them and all of that sort of stuff. But crashes, there was something about that age. I mean, I suppose when you think back on it again, Formula One was a very dangerous time. Lots of drivers were being killed in crashes. It was unfortunately part and parcel of that business at that time. The space race was leading to quite a lot of deaths. There were people catching fire on the launch pad, cosmonauts coming back inexplicably dead in their capsules. The air crashes were far more frequent than they are now. We had, comets falling out of the skies and all sorts of things like that. And they were, so crashes were, car safety is that the same? There were enormous numbers of car accidents, many unfortunately fatal or serious, and they were much more part and parcel of life at that time. So when you saw sort of crashes taking place almost in slow motion on Thunderbirds, there was I probably shouldn't admit it, but there was a sort of a vicarious enjoyment. I like to see things crumbling and exploding.
I don't think that's a bad confession. I mean, I think there's something really amazing about watching real world physics acting on destroying something, and that there was always a thrill for me watching those things. If there was an explosion and a piece of debris came flying towards camera, that was like oh wow. And the way it was shot, obviously filmed at high speed and then played back normal, and that gave everything weight. But there's something that real world physics brings to it which can't be replaced by CG or animation now.
Yeah, and I remember casting forward into the sort of Captain Scarlet series, there was one where they were on top of a sort of a wobbling tower which was in the process of disintegrating.
First episode.
Was it? Yeah. Blue, I think, was on the top of it.
The car view.
Yeah, and it took ages to topple over. But it was thrilling, it was exciting. I mean, this thing was wavering around and disintegrating, and so I did like all of that as well.
And when it finally comes down...
Yes, I know.
Well, since you've taken us to Captain Scarlet, Chris.
Oh, well, that was, for me, Again, it was a quantum leap forward. I felt that there was an enormous difference between Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet in terms of the characterisation, particularly. I mean, it's difficult because I was growing up at the same time. Of course. But it seemed to be growing up with me. And that's, I've got my UFO T-shirt on. It was all part of a process of growing up, as it were. And it felt that it was, we were doing it in synchrony. And I loved Captain Scarlet. That was my favourite of all of them, probably. I loved the whole ethos of his indestructibility. I loved the conflict with the Mysterons, the Captain Black, Cloud Base. I loved the whole set. The Angels, amazing. I even liked their names, Destiny and all that stuff. Their hair was fantastic. I mean, they were sexy women, and they were flying jets, for goodness sake. The women didn't fly jets, and they didn't fly jets with multicoloured hair. But at some point in the future, they were going to. And that was just really fantastic, And again, the models, I mean, that you've gone from Stingray, which had an ergonomic beauty to it, through the practicality of the Thunderbirds. And as we've already discussed, the fact that they looked realistic. Yep. But then you get to Captain Scarlet and I mean, they're just beautiful. They're absolutely beautiful. I mean, all of the vehicles, I just loved the shape of them. And even now, they hold their own. They were beautiful designs. And the idea of this thing floating up in the clouds where everyone came and went, it was just phenomenal. I loved that. There was a real romance to that side of it. So yeah, Captain Scarlet, and the opening sequence with the shadows and the sort of grating footsteps.
That is so spooky, isn't it?
Just so good. And the eyes of the Mysterons, Yeah. And again, and what I liked about it was that, and we were just watching a film last night, A Quiet Place, Megs and I, and it's always scarier when you don't see the aliens. And you didn't. This is the voice of the Mysterons, You just got the voice of the Mysterons and some trace, and that was it. And that was scarier.
Yeah, because they could be anywhere, could be anyone.
They were in my bedroom. They were under my bed.
Of course, probably a school teacher or something.
Yeah, they were many school teachers. And certainly the man next door, he was a Mysteron without a shred of a doubt, So that was great. I mean, I think, again, there was sort of there was more inventiveness. It was as if the narratives were maturing, the characterization was maturing, the models were getting, better and better. They were truly fantastic.
Well, it's certainly getting darker.
Yeah.
That must have been part of the draw, the sort of violence and the dead puppets and stuff. Because you certainly couldn't put it on in front of a modern kids audience because the broadcaster wouldn't let it go. But
they were strange times, isn't it? We had the singing ringing tree, and I was talking to Billy Bragg yesterday about the singing ringing tree and about the profound impact that East German fairy tale had on our generation. I mean, this was dark, scary TV. I mean, I still have nightmares about the singing ringing tree. That. Just as there's a positive side to, all of the Anderson series, the Singing Ringing Tree has been a very negative force in my life. There's no doubt about that, because these things were very powerful at a very influential time of life. So they did. It's not surprising that there's this cult interest that we're having this conversation about these series. They were massively, powerful in terms of their input and the way that we saw the world, thought about the world. I dressed like Captain Scarlet for years. I still feel most comfortable in a very neat tunic with zips. That's how I like to go out. I don't like creased things. I don't like collars. I don't like anything that's not neat. I like crisp and neat. I spent a lot of my time in the outdoor. My wardrobe split in two. It's outdoors, which is practical, necessary, and then the rest of it is like something straight out of the set of Captain Scarlet, because that's how I feel most comfortable. Black shoes, black trousers, colourful top, zips, neat, nothing, no creases.
And a cat with a microphone.
Well, I haven't gone that far, but if the microphone could work and I could achieve some of the things that he did, I'd get one straight away. I'd be onto eBay straight away.
It is an amazing set of influences on people. I keep meeting people who've gone into various careers because of it.
Yeah.
People have gone on to work at NASA and all sorts of stuff. So It's incredible how it's influenced people. Hopefully not too negatively, though.
No, I can't think of anything negative that's come from that. I mean, the key thing was that it was unique. I mean, it was stand out. You know, there was nothing else like it at the time. It was top quality standout TV, and it left everything else in the shade. I mean, it was the go-to kids' TV. There was nothing else on that was of that caliber. You know, it was just miles ahead of everything else, and it was British, and we were doing it. You know, not that I was so conscious of that at the time, of course, but retrospectively, that was, you know, to be celebrated. But yeah, Captain Scarlet was my main thing, massive influence. And then, of course, the other thing which we haven't discussed is all the merchandising that goes with it. Because, Absolutely. Again, there was an enormous thirst for that. And you can't underestimate, you know, it was chocolate bars, it was cornflakes, it was absolute bubblegum, it was everywhere. They did a brilliant job of saturating the market at a time when, you know, parents like mine had just about enough disposable income to be able to afford that stuff for their kids. And so, you know, I've got the whole set of Captain Scarlet cards. In fact, I've got two sets. I've got one unmounted and one stuck together, which I stuck together so that you could have, because on the back of them was an image, you know, that you could make a jigsaw made up of all of the cards, 50 cards. And so I've got two sets, but, you know, swapping them at school and trying to get the last one was amazing. But it wasn't just that. It was, like I say, it was chocolate bars. And at Christmas, I just remember Christmas was all about Thunderbirds, all about Captain Scarlet. It was all about that stuff. Did you have enough batteries? My parents did great things. They got me the toys. They just never got enough batteries. Thunderbird 5 was flat by about Boxing Day morning.
Of course it was.
You know.
And that's so disappointing when that happens. Beyond the toys, though, did you ever get TV 21?
Yes,
comic?
The comics were fantastic. I loved TV Century 21. It was just, they were amazing. And I loved all the graphics. In fact, the drawings in those were very much better than those on most of the cards and so on and so forth. There's a couple of really great cards. There's one of Scarlet with a shark swimming around him. He's got his foot stuck in a giant clam. I remember that one. There's one with a rhino charging him. I remember all the animal ones in particular.
Of course you do.
Yeah. And there's one where he's, my favourite, I think, of all of them, because of the perspectives, is where he's sort of standing on with his hands pressing out on two walls, which are crushing him with giant spikes in. So, I mean, I remember all of those images are really powerful, the graphic nature of them. Yeah. I mean, these were graphic novels, weren't they? They were the early stage of graphic novels. You know, they were beautifully illustrated and very dynamic, and the perspectives, you know, in those illustrations were exciting. You know, again, when you looked at the illustrations, say, on the front of an Airfix kit at that time, it was very much Spitfire in profile, you know, but when you looked at the drawings in Century 21, there was that really dramatic perspective. Things were going in and coming out. So they were visually really exciting, and I loved copying the drawings from those, and for that reason.
Yeah, they were really, really beautiful pieces of art.
Yeah, I wished I'd at some point in the past sort of thought, I must try and collect some of those. I'd love to have some of them now. I've toyed with the idea of getting the bubblegum cards, my favourite ones, sort of blown up to sort of, I don't know, A2 size, and then putting them on the wall. I did that once with a couple of football cards. With footballers from a similar period, and I had them sort of printed on the wall for a while, and they were sort of emblematic. You could almost smell the bubble gum on them, you know, of that time. But yeah, that Century 21 was fantastic. We didn't ever subscribe to those things, so I had to sort of be with my mum in the newsagents to get them. So I never had the continuity of having all of them. I didn't like that. It was something I resented. I'm a sets person. I have to have the whole set. So my record collection is like every record from the band, but it's also all the records from the small labels that started in the late, you know, mid to late 70s. So I am a set person. I've got all these vases here, which are, again, very Jerry Anderson, actually, and that they come in different forms and colours, and I haven't got the set yet. So I'm constantly on eBay trying to find a yellow one like that, which is in fact very, very rare. So I'm struggling with that one at the moment. But I didn't have the set of the comics. I've got one or two of them left.
Yeah.
And they were on that paper as well, which doesn't preserve very well. It's sort of quite fragile, the paper.
Yeah.
It was shiny and brittle.
Yeah, well, I guess they weren't really thinking people would be holding on to them 50 years later.
No, I suppose they weren't. They should have done. Should have done.
Yeah, no, I mean, looking around where we are, I can certainly see a sort of Spectrum vibe going on.
Yeah, I like my retro carpets and rugs, and all of these are from that same period. And here in the cottage, things are a little bit different than in my house in France, which is cloud-based. I wish I could take you there. It's just flat floors, white walls, bold, bright primary colours with seats that you can't crumple. They're all sort of rigid finished. There's no soft furnishings, as it were, in that sense. No cushions or anything like that. I go there to be in cloud-based.
It's pretty serious influence on your life.
Yeah.
In terms of the change of puppets from Thunderbirds to Scarlet,
Yeah.
what was your feeling there? Or did it not really?
Well, they were slightly more human, weren't they? They didn't have the massive eyebrows. Facially, they were better proportioned. There was no question of that. They were still puppets, but we didn't mind that. I loved the fact that they were puppets.
Yeah.
It was part of that otherworldliness, But yeah, there was a distinct progression from when you thought about Stingray, and the head shape was they had massive eyes and huge eyebrows, and the hair was always a mess. And then through Thunderbirds as well, heads were too big for the bodies, but their proportions were getting better. And the thing is with Captain Scarlet, they also did a bit of live action, because occasionally human hands would come in.
Oh, they do those back in, possibly even back as far as Fireball.
Oh, did they?
Certainly, I mean...
There were a lot more, I think.
Yeah, they were definitely...
In Scarlet, there were all of a sudden a hand would come in and do something complicated, like
bother
fix
you?
a watch, which the puppet was never going to do,
I always found that a bit jarring when I was watching it as a kid.
I did. I didn't like it. I found it a bit creepy, actually.
Yeah.
It was like, all of a sudden, it was a bit weird having that mix.
Yeah, whose hands are they? They're not Captain Scarlet's hands.
No.
Yeah, it was a strange thing. Yeah, because there's a constant tussle again between people who prefer the marionette style of Thunderbirds, the larger heads, the more sort of over-the-top features.
Yeah.
And Scarlet was Dad's attempt to get towards live action because he was desperate to do live action.
Yeah, I read that. He was really keen to do live action because he'd made a couple of films and things like that. And it was weird. I often wonder what happened, because obviously the enormous success of the, Super Marination and the other Marination, I can't remember what they call the other one, but, there's, they must have been aware of all of that. But at the same time, he was yearning to get out of it. It's rather odd, It was sort of because it was globally successful and highly acclaimed. It was almost. I mean, was it the case that he sort of made a monster for himself? Really, that he, was it a bit like that?
He always wanted to be the kind of he wanted to be making epics like Ben-Hur when he went into film and TV, and then he got stuck doing the puppets initially.
Yeah,
and was driven by embarrassment essentially. He wanted to make them as good as possible, and that was part of the thing which drove the whole progression into, especially towards Thunderbirds and Scarlet. But I don't think he ever really, at the time, took in this kind of, hang on, this thing is a magic formula we're doing really well.
Bizarre.
He was thinking, how can I use it as a springboard?
Well, it's amazing, isn't it?
To get to live action.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you mentioned Lou Grade always wanting something new for the American market. And that must have been frustrating, having built all the models and developed all the characters and written all the scripts and got every team together. But at the same time, the 60s was a very rapidly progressing decade. Technology, of course, politics, music, everything was moving very rapidly. So I think that in many ways, 6 years of Thunderbirds would have been disastrous. So I think that whilst that would have been frustrating for the rest of us, it was essential. It kept that progression. I mentioned, I sort of was maturing alongside it, but so was time, So I think that the continual improvement for the puppets I saw as important. I was probably subconsciously measuring that as important. That was good. Things were getting better as the real rockets and the real cars were getting better. Then so they were.
Okay. And did you feel things carried on getting better into Joe 90, Chris?
I didn't like Joe 90.
Neither did I.
I didn't like it. I don't know. There was something about it. I didn't like Joe 90 the boy. I didn't like his... It was his uncle, wasn't it?
It was his dad and Uncle Sam.
Uncle Sam, that's right. Yeah. Uncle Sam, his dad and Uncle Sam.
I mean, I found Joe to be a precocious little tosser.
Yeah.
I didn't gel with him when I was watching him as a kid. I've always found him irritating.
Yeah. So
to me, Joe 90 was a bit of a miss. I've come round to it a bit more recently. I've tried watching a few recently.
Oh, I have to go back.
I don't find him as annoying now. I'm not a kid.
Right.
But I think they hoped that
Yeah.
having a kid in would make the kids watching feel more like they were part
But
of
then
it.
if you're a kid, you've got to be, the kid, it's got to be something you want to aspire to be.
Yeah.
And therefore they have to be incomplete so that you can project yourself upon them. The problem with Joe 90 was the whole point was that he was complete. They put him in that machine that spun round and he became the expert on everything.
Yeah.
So how could you become him? You couldn't. So it was a closed door there. He also, obviously, I mean, I grew up in a very much sort of working class family, and he lived in that big country house. And I
Not dissimilar from your place now, Chris.
No, maybe not. Bigger than my place now. But at that point in time, when a 3 up, 3 down, I couldn't connect with Joe 90. Yeah. He was the spoilt rich kid from school who had the ability to know everything, and therefore, why would I bother to even want to find out the first thing about that subject? My attitude was, if Joe 90 knows everything about rocket science, I'll go and learn everything about, John Constable and English landscape painting, because. I was never a fool. I always recognised that in order to succeed, you must avoid competition. That's what happens outside. I learned that from nature. So, Joe 90, but this was the weirdest thing, that I'd gone from this consummate, passionate love, and adoration of Captain Scarlet into an almost instantaneous loathing of Joe 90. And I never had any Joe 90 toys. Nothing. Not a single one. The dinky thing with the sort of wobbly wheels, I remember the wobbly sort of went up and down. Didn't own it, didn't have it, had nothing, absolutely nothing. It was just weird. I don't remember turning it off. I don't remember thinking, oh, I hate this program so much I'll turn it off.
Yeah.
But it was completely lost. I was lost. It was just didn't like it. Other kids at school were quite into Joe 90, and obviously he had the spectacles, and there were quite a few kids at school who had similar specs.
Yeah.
So there was a point of connectivity for them there. I didn't wear glasses. But you know what? I remember kids being taunted for looking like Joe 90.
Yes. I hear that all the time. People who, we've had people sending in pictures of them at school in their Joe 90 specs and saying, I got bullied terribly.
Yeah. So they misjudged it. I think, how dare I suggest that, but I do think they got that one wrong.
Stop the podcast. Podcast listeners, this is future Jamie. Of course, past Richard and Jamie, who recorded before the Chris Packham interview, had no idea how long that Chris and I would be chatting for. So what we're doing is splitting Chris's interview in two on the bombshell of him not liking Joe 90 and it nearly driving him away from the Jerry Anderson universe. Will Chris continue enjoying Jerry Anderson shows? Will he be lost forever thanks to that spoiled little brat Joe 90? Find out next week in Pod 12. And now back to past Richard and Jamie. Well, that was a great interview / could have been better / unfortunately I didn't make it.
I'm going to assume you made it and assume it was a great interview. Because we can't comment on it because we haven't heard it because you haven't done it yet.
Normally we record the interviews in advance and we can, comment on something relevant, but I don't know. No. I'm sure Chris was lovely. Yeah. Thank you very much, Chris Packham, for doing that. And hopefully he will have mentioned where to follow him on Twitter and stuff.
Yes.
And he's doing a national tour called Chris Packham's Bio Blitz, I think.
Okay.
So look that up online.
Great.
Maybe he'll talk about an interview. I don't know.
Yeah. I could also recommend his Fingers in the Sparkle Jar. Great book. His sort of autobiography, really. A really interesting book. Yeah.
I probably should have read that as research before the interview.
You should have done. Yeah, but anyway, you can mention it in the interview, can't you? Now, this is getting really weird. I'm now, having heard the interview, I'm suggesting things to you that you can raise in the interview.
It's all getting a bit timey-wimey.
Yeah, it's getting a bit Stephen Moffat, isn't it?
Yeah, anyway, there's plenty more of interviews. There will be plenty more interviews where that came from. No, there will be plenty more.
It's all. The tenses are all at the spout.
Here we go. There are going to be plenty more interviews like that in upcoming podcasts, or you can go back and listen to our previous ones with Gary Newman, Lee Sullivan, Sophia Miles, David Graham, Lizo Mazumba, etc., etc.
Yes.
So
do give them a listen.
Yeah, subscribe so you can get the next one. There'll be another one next week. I don't know who it's with yet because we haven't recorded it. Probably. I don't know. Maybe we have. Who knows? Anyway. Anyway, what's next, Richard?
Well, I think it's time to just read out a little message we had on Twitter from Sterling Silliphant.
Great name.
I mean, if you're not
I hope
an
that's
actor,
the real name.
You really should be an actor or a Bond villain. And Sterling Silliphant says, I'm enjoying Chris Dale's contributions to the Anderson webcasts, by which he can only mean the randomizer. So I think it's time to hand over to Chris Dale and see what he's got on his plate for this week.
Dad, there's someone to see you. It's Chris.
Hello, Professor. Mind if we come in?
Didn't take you long to get down here. I'm just inserting the library tape you phoned me about.
Excellent. Oh, Professor, Joe, this is Marina. Marina, Professor McLean, and Joe.
I'd like her.
Good. There you are, Marina. I told you Professor McLean could help us improve the randomizer. Where is our brand new Mark II randomizer, by the way?
Is this it, Dad?
This is it.
Aha! What's that, Marina? No, we did not just paint Mark II on the old randomizer. I mean, that's not all we've done. No, it may look the same on the outside, but from now on the insides are going to function completely differently.
How does it work?
Well, Joe, I haven't the faintest idea, but let me ask you a question. How many UFO episodes has the randomizer selected so far?
That's easy. None.
Precisely. No UFO, no Space 1999, no Fireball XL5, no Terrorhawks, and yet we've had 2 supercars, 2 Stingrays, and 2 Joe 90s in the first 9 selections. It's not really been as random as I was hoping. So, your father has very kindly agreed to install a brand new selection processor in the randomizer to redress the balance, and hopefully this week we might just land on an episode from a series we've not yet seen. So, if you'd like to press the button, Joe, we can find out whether or not the new processor has indeed taken. Oh, by the way, Joe, Jamie Anderson told me to tell you that he is a huge fan of yours and he would absolutely love to interview you on his podcast someday.
Smashing!
Yes. OK, Marina, what does the printout say? Oh. Well, thank you very much, Professor. It looks like the new processor is a success. We have indeed landed on a series that we've not yet seen on the randomizer, and it's our very first live-action episode.
Well, Chris, as far as I'm concerned, it's just a dream come true.
Yes. It's Space 1999, Journey to Where? Well, here we are with our very first live-action episode on the randomizer, and this is going to be, I think, a pretty interesting one to talk about, because this episode is one of the few from the second series that seemingly everybody is okay with. They're not... The second series comes in for a lot of criticism, as I'm sure everybody knows. This episode... It seems to be almost universally loved. Even people who are fans of Space 1999 and who don't really like the second season have a lot of time for this one. A couple of years ago, I put together a video, my top 5 favourite and least favourite episodes of Space 1999 Series 2. I left this one off the best list. I think it just missed out on a space in the top 5. And a lot of people said, where was this episode? So it's clear there's love out there for it, and I remember it being pretty good. Let's see if it still holds up.
Don't know, but it's no random transmission. They're calling us.
As indicated by the words calling Moonbase Alpha, they might just be calling us. We're Moonbase Alpha. What a coincidence.
This is Space Station 1, Texas City, planet Earth. I repeat.
Now this episode is fairly important to the evolution of the show, because this is, as far as I remember, the first indication that Earth even survived the moon breaking out of orbit. There was a couple of mentions through the first season that, for all they knew, the Earth may no longer exist. Now this episode introduces a couple of new characters to the series, Dr. Ben Vincent and Yasko. And it's kind of an indication of the slightly cynical thinking that was going on behind the scenes, which Martin Landau has mentioned a couple of times. The whole no one will notice thing when things change suddenly for no reason. After episode 3, 2 cast members, 2 people who had been regular cast members on the first season, Xenia Merton and Anton Phillips, both left the show. Now, we need to replace those roles, even though in the second series they're largely just there to press buttons or deliver occasional bits of exposition. And the decision was made, and I think this episode kind of clearly shows that it was a genuine, calculated decision, to replace those two characters with characters who physically are almost exactly the same. You have Dr. Ben Vincent replacing Dr. Matthias, both black men with afros, and you have Yasko replacing Sandra, who both of whom are black-haired Oriental women. And it's definitely a step down, I think. Jeffrey Kassoon is a really good actor, but I never quite got on with Ben Vincent because he seemed a bit of a git, and Yasko, well, there's a wonderful shot in this where a passing extra just taps her on the shoulder, and she reacts as if she's suddenly forgotten where she is, who she is, how to speak, how to move. She's an odd one. And I look at her and think, you know, maybe you're doing your best, but I just wish Xenia Merton was still here. I wish you guys had had made better use of your old guard. It's a shame that some of them were put into a position where they felt they had to leave.
Wowee! Hey!
Don't kiss me, Tony. You have not shaved today. And this episode introduces another running theme for the second season: Tony Vedeshi's beer brewing antics. If this was meant as humour, if this was meant as a running joke, even if this was meant as character development, it's dreadful. Maybe as a one-off mention in one episode, one scene like this, it would be fine, but they come back to it over and over again throughout the series, and it is just a comedy graveyard. This is another example of the slightly childish humour in the second series. Maya's just drunk Tony's beer and turned into Mr. Hyde. And it's a fairly cheap-looking Hyde costume as well, which makes the whole thing more cringy, but
Do you know your problem, Tony?
it leads to this wonderful moment between Tony and Maya.
Prejudiced.
Me prejudiced? Just because you look funny, come from the planet Psychon, and turn into an eel the last time I put my arms around you?
Prejudice.
That's not prejudice.
What is it then?
Fascination.
It had been hinted at in earlier episodes that Tony and Maya had a thing for each other, but this scene, I think, is really the first one to definitely sell that idea. You can definitely see why Maya would fall for Tony, and Maya herself is just so playful and so silly, but at the end of that scene when he reminds her that they're all going home and she just looks so heartbroken, it's one of the reasons I definitely have Maya as my favourite female Jerry Anderson character, I think, because there's so much warmth and so much sparkle to her, but there's this underlying vulnerability as well. Freddie Jones is here along with Isla Blair, both of whom have fairly questionable American accents, but Freddie Jones has also a bizarre line in Head Tilts. Now here we're getting our first look of Texas City as seen on the screen in Command Center, and it's always struck me as odd that the Alphans aren't horrified by seeing what's happened to their former world. A, because it's a barren wasteland covered with protective domes, but B, because those protective domes are clearly powered by what look to be disco lights.
Cities are fantastic.
No, they're not. I've just told you they're not. Now, this is an odd way to bring up the fact that Earth is now more or less a devastated world, because they're blaming it on pollution, not the fact that the moon was ripped out of orbit, not the fact that there was probably a massive
nature.
Nuclear fallout.
Who needs nature?
Why are you toasting this? You people are weird. I'm not an expert on science or medicine or anything, and I think anyone who's looking to bring hard science into Space 1999 is definitely onto a losing thing, but I'm not entirely convinced about this whole clamping a wristwatch monitor to a test package thing to test the effect of the transfers effects on the Alphans. The arrival of the test package on Earth is I'm looking at this in quite a nice scene, because even though I said that Freddie Jones and Isla Blair aren't necessarily 100% on the accents, the test package has just arrived and they've spent like 15 seconds smiling and grinning and clapping and looking at each other, and it's all so genuine, as indeed is that shot of Command Center with them all celebrating, all except for Maya, who is sat in the background trying to be happy for everybody, but you know she's just, as we find out in later episodes, she would rather not go and live a life on Earth when she's an alien.
You said 3, didn't they?
You told me heroes were fools who had a talent for nothing else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right, honey. I'm a talentless fool. Go me.
Let Alpha be my long-lost past.
Now, there was obviously a definite shift in the second series towards making these characters feel more real, hence the whole Tony's beer brewing, hence the whole Tony Meyer, John and Helena romance things. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. I think the only time where the softening of these characters always genuinely worked was with Alan Carter. Nick Tate, no matter what he was given, even if it was obvious drivel, he could make it so charming and so real. And I loved Alan Carter in the first series anyway, but in the second series, he's such a nice guy to be around. Which is why it's a shame he's not in all the episodes of the second series like he was in the first series. So now John, Helena and Alan have been displaced. Their projection, transmission, whatever, to Texas City has been thrown off by the earthquake thingy. And now we find ourselves in Black Park, behind Pinewood Studios. This is again an element of the second series where they scored over the first series in that they did more location filming. It was almost always Black Park, but they only did location filming in one episode of the first season. That was Full Circle. So it is nice to see them go to alien planets in the second series and have it be a real, actual place. It's not just a studio set, even though, as we say, it is Black Park. Black Park is a lovely looking place.
Computer's acting up.
Stay on it. Logan here.
Isla Blair is doing some sterling prop handling work in the background here, manipulating various pieces of plastic into other pieces of plastic.
Not sure we can detonate.
Pretending it's her computer. It is quite sad, but it's a sort of testament to the kind of actors that they would get on this show, who had to make business like this look decent.
Normal except for Dr. Russell's temperature. It's rising.
Rising?
Probably means infection.
Or she's really hot.
I'm doing everything I can.
You're not a real doctor, are you? You're no Dr. Matthias, that's for sure. So now we have Koenig, Helena and Alan walking through the forest of Black Park, being watched by mysterious figures from the bushes. I don't think it's any spoiler to say that they are on Earth, but they've been thrown back in time, which makes this one of the few, very few, Jerry Anderson episodes to include time travel. And you'd think, for being one of the biggest names in British science fiction, his work would have touched on time travel more, but it's very rare that he did. We have certain episodes in which time is used to reset things when everything's gone to custard. Matter of Life and Death, War Games, or even those are kind of questionable. It could just be some other kind of reset rather than time travel. Obviously we have UFO's Time Lash, which more plays around with time-related concepts than features actual time travel. The only time travel episodes really that I can think of are 1875 from Fireball XL5, My Kingdom for Azif from Terrorhawks, which also included a couple of, for lack of a better term, timey-wimey related episodes with Lord Tempo. Time to Kill in Space Precinct. But again, that wasn't really going into history, that was just going back to the start of the episode and making sure that things didn't go wrong. So really, we only have, unless I'm wrong, 3 going back into history episodes in any of his shows. Obviously, we can discount Four Feather Falls as that was already set in the past. So it's just this, My Kingdom for Azif, and 1875, which is quite odd. Now, Texas City have decided, along with the help of Maya, that the only way to solve the effects of the explosion is to create more explosions. Not sure of the science of that, but it seems a very Jerry Anderson way to solve a problem. And now we're back to Isla Blair playing with her pieces of plastic. This poor woman is doing such a great job. And of course, she had a fairly thankless guest role in the first season as well, when she was playing an alien in War Games, who was just given a bald cap and stuck in a cabinet for a whole episode. I'm not sure. I think she may be the only returning guest actor from the first season. I'm sure I'm wrong. There must be someone else. But...
We still have time to send some of you back down to Earth. Anybody wants to try it?
I'm only extending this offer to the 5 people in this room. I mean, screw the other 300 people on the base. You 5 are the ones who are going to get this offer.
I'd rather stay on Alpha than end up somewhere in space.
Oh, that's one of those moments where you can see what Xenia Merton would have done with it. And it... Oh, I don't want to say anything bad about Yuzuko Nagazumi, but I will say that Yasko is no replacement for Sandra by any means.
It's a moon.
It's a moon, Helena, but it's not our moon. This planet can have 6 or 7.
I do like the idea as well that the way they find out that they've been thrown back in time is by seeing the moon up there. In any other show, that would be... It would function in the same way, that it would be a symbol that they're back on Earth. But for this show, the moon is obviously such a personal thing for them because it is now their home. It's a shame in a way that they've chosen this whole distant past thing for the time travel element, because it would be interesting if they'd instead chosen something relating more to the premise of the series. If someone had been thrown back to just before the moon left, if they had like the choice, say it was Maya thrown back in time to before the breakaway, and she had the option of preventing the whole thing from happening, keeping the moon in orbit, keeping all those millions who inevitably died after the moon left orbit from dying at the cost of her own future with them, because if the moon never left orbit, she would never have been picked up when Psychon exploded. That would have been interesting. And I do like this, the medieval setting for this one as well. I think they do a good job with it, but as the only time travel episode that the show did, I'm not convinced they made the best use of the idea. I think it's a solid B+ effort. It's nothing bad. I just think, maybe for what should be a landmark episode, this doesn't necessarily feel as important as it should.
But there's one thing I still don't understand.
What the hell accent am I trying to do? I think it's supposed to be Scottish, but I seem to be coming out as slightly Cornish, slightly Welsh.
30 minutes before the eclipse begins.
Freddie Jones now looks like he's appearing on a chat show. He's just sat down in his chair like he's waiting for his next guest. Now, Koenig and company are about to be burned alive for having the plague. And in this scene, we can see a couple of sort of stereotypical medieval type tropes. Aside from the burning, we also have Terry Walsh is hanging around as a chappie with a sword, who you may know as being a regular stuntman on Doctor Who. I think he turned up a couple of times on this as well as an Alphan. But we also have just a cackling old crone who does nothing except hunch over and screech a lot, which is quite fun. And she's just been given 2 torches and she looks so happy. It's like, yes, I am the Torch Queen. Now, the way that Koenig and Co get out of this is they've established that they are somewhere 25 years after the Battle of Bannockburn. And it's not really precise enough that you could ever imagine them being able to be rescued just with that information. But luckily, Koenig knows his Morse code and he's tapping that out on Helena's little wrist monitor. And here we have a sci-fi staple, seen a couple of times in Jerry Anderson shows, where we're confronted with Morse code.
Does that mean anything to you?
Just some sort of...
And nobody understands it. But in this case...
Does anybody get that? Wait a minute.
We have this guy.
It's the old Morse code.
Who has been hanging around in the background throughout this whole episode. Not a regular extra, not a member of the regular cast, and he's just stepped in to save the day at the last minute. Thank you, bald guy who has no place in the show, for just saving the day.
Goodbye, Texas City.
And like I said earlier, for for discovering that Earth survived the breakaway, for Alpha's first contact with Earth since then, this doesn't feel as epic an event as it should. And you can imagine if the series was remade today, this would be like a 3-parter. This would be like a huge mid-season epic thing. But instead it's just like, okay, we're done with that. Now back to Tony's beer-brewing antics. Thank goodness we kept those around.
You're not giving up, Tony, are you?
Oh, no. He's just going back to the drawing board. Pilots.
I love that, whatever it is that Nick Tate did at the end of that line, though, that strange, smug head tilt thing. I do like... I can't not like Alan Carter. Even when the show's at its silliest, I still love Alan Carter.
A history like that. Who wants to go back to Earth anyway?
Well, it's got to be better than your current situation. But, alas, no time to discuss that. We've reached the end of Journey to Where, which, yeah, I can definitely see why a lot of people like this one. It's a shame, like I said, that we never really went to the time travel well too many times, and there's more they could have done with this. But for what it is, it's definitely an above-average episode of the second season. I still don't think it's quite top 5 material, but definitely one of the better episodes of the second season. Toodaloo!
Well, see, now when I heard that season 2 music, I thought, oh dear, because generally season 2 of Space 1999 has a bit of a bad reputation, but
yes.
When you watched as a kid, Richard, because we know about your eagle in the bucket of sick.
Yeah.
And if you don't know about that story, then go back and listen to previous episodes. It's a good incentive to go and listen to earlier pods.
That's right. Well, you see, this went completely over my head as a child. I didn't even know there were any sort of creative or stylistic differences between season 1 and 2 until I got a bit older and heard people talking about them.
Yeah.
I mean, I must have been probably 8 or 9, I suppose, watching it first time round.
Probably not quite old enough to really sort of dissect it then.
It was just another episode of Space 1999 from what I remember. But now I know there's this huge debate. People fall out over it.
They do, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
It's rather like what happened with Star Trek, I think, wasn't it? Was Series 1 and 2 was very different from Series 3. I think.
Yeah, and that was Freddie Freiberger as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, indeed.
As a sort of consultant, the show killer.
Yeah, the show killer, that's right.
Yeah, he and Dad had a bit of a falling out, I think.
Right.
Anyway, there we are. So, thank you very much, Chris. And
yes.
I love the model of Texas City from that episode. It's a real, sort of really interesting concept, quite fun actually. In fact, we've used it as a reference for something more recently.
Aha. Also, Chris confessing that Maya is his favourite female Jerry Anderson character.
Yeah.
Yes.
I felt a bit bad for Marina there because literally she's just sat there.
Yeah.
And Chris is going, well, you're obviously not my favourite Marina. So
talking of favourite female characters,
yes.
Paul O'Grady got himself into a bit of trouble with you this week, didn't he, Jamie?
Well, not with me. He got himself into trouble with Zelda from Terrorhawks.
Yes.
Silly sod.
Yes.
He played the Terrorhawks theme on his Radio 2 show, and then said something about it, Terrorhawks not being Jerry Anderson's finest hour.
Well, how dare he?
Well, I can hear half of you listening to this going, well, quite right too, I completely agree with it. But the other half going, naughty Paul O'Grady. Well, Zelda is obviously sides on the latter, and she got rather angry and essentially threatened to cut his head off on Twitter. It probably is not illegal, but she makes up her own rules. So watch out, Paul O'Grady, you're in trouble.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So thank you very much to Chris for another wonderful randomizer. You can send us your thoughts on podcast@jerryanderson.co.uk and hear what Chris has to say next week and which episode he'll be forced to watch next time.
Yeah, I'm still not sure he's forced, he does it of his own volition. But
I know, it's true, yeah. I'm just trying to build a sense of drama, that's all.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yeah, that's okay.
Poor Chris, I hope he's all right.
Yeah, that's better.
Anyway, if you want to enter our giveaway, head to jerryanderson.co.uk/giveaway. You've only got 3 days left to do it, so hurry up! And that's it, isn't it, Richard?
Yes, all I have to say is subscribe, rate, and review.
And remember, we're not just saying it. Please actually do now go.
Yeah. That's right. And we love to see all your comments on Twitter, so please do keep tweeting us. Give us your thoughts and comments. For example, we do have one here from Scott Varney, loving the Jerry Anderson podcast, and wondered whether you have reached out to Frank Skinner for an interview. He regularly refers to your dad's work and does a good X20 from Stingray impression. He's definitely a big fan. Well, that's an idea, isn't it? That's from Scott Varney. Thanks, Scott.
I would love to have Frank on.
Yeah.
He's not on Twitter, is he?
I don't believe he's on Twitter, no.
I may have to reach out via Big Finish because he does a lot of Big Finish, doesn't he?
Yeah, that's right. That'd be great, wouldn't it?
I will do my best. But in the coming weeks, you can expect, as I said, lots of Firestorm-related interviews.
Nice.
I'm off to interview Shane Rimmer in a couple of weeks' time.
Great.
I'm off up to McKinnon and Saunders, who made the Firestorm puppets, also made the Lavender Castle puppets. If you know what Lavender Castle is, then great. If not, go and look it up. So yeah, lots of interesting stuff still to come. But until then, until Pod 12,
at least Pod 12, yes.
I better get on the road again.
Yeah, before you get clamped.
Thanks, Richard.
Have a safe journey, Jamie.
Thanks, and thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye-bye.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Stage 1 complete.
Let's go.
Spectrum is green.
Right.
Oh, hang on. I'm just looking over your shoulder. Is that a parking inspector? Have you got a ticket?
I haven't yet. I did actually look there, though. You terrible tease. No, although I've just realised it's 2 hours free parking and my 2 hours are up. So
well, we timed that
I hope they
perfectly,
haven't got
didn't
ANPR and it's going to send me a ticket or something.
Yeah, oh dear.
No, anyway, it's so hot in this car. I've got to get the engine.
Why didn't you crack a window?
Well, because then there'd be bleed from outside.
So people would join in?
I don't want that.
Oh.
Let's get the engine going, get the air.
Get the aircon on.
Oh, that's better.